Good morning, Key Stage 1 children. It's Monday the 15th of June today. I hope you've had a great weekend. Now this week we're going to continue with our writing about that story, Piper, that you should have watched now lots and lots of times on the video. So let's get going. We're going to look inside my brain again today and look and see just how I think when I'm being a writer and how you can think when you're writing too. Okay children, so if we have a look back at how far we've come, at how well we've done so far, we have written 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks of our writing already. So you can give yourself a nice pat on the back for that already. Brilliant work. And I know that Miss Parsons and myself have been really proud of the work that you've been uploading on Class Dojo, so keep it coming. Now let's have a look at my work so far. I'm just going to read it to you to give you an idea about how the story is sounding, and we'll decide whether or not we like it. Okay, so listen up. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. You might want to close your eyes so that you can imagine the scene, or you can just have a look at the words on the screen now. Mum fluttered away to grab some food. Piper peered into the distance and spotted his mother catching a juicy worm. Impatiently, the hungry little bird chirped and twittered, desperate to be fed. The young, curious sandpiper hurtled towards the ocean. He caught an insect and trapped it between his skinny, strong legs. All of a sudden, a noisy wave smashed down upon the pebbled sand and roared over Piper. Piper awoke from his daydream with a jolt. He remembered how the icy water felt against his feathers. He shuddered. Afraid and alone, Piper heard his tummy give a loud rumble. He decided enough was enough. The determined chick flitted across the sunshine yellow sand and scurried towards the water's edge. He had just spotted an unlucky worm when another ferocious wave charged straight at him. Blimey, what did you think of my writing? I think it's quite exciting, and it's because I've been following our writing challenges to make my writing really interesting. I'm sure yours is just as fabulous. So today, children, we are focusing on plot point 5 here, and I've called it watching and learning, because this is the part when Piper is watching the little crab and learning how he finds food in the sand. So you might want to, and I would recommend that you do, that you watch the video from 1 minute 34 to 1 minute 57 to remind yourself of this section that we're going to be writing about today. And our writing challenges today. The first one, interesting verbs. We're going to come back to that today. We did it last week, didn't we? We had a look at interesting action words. And today we're going to have another go to try and find some more interesting verbs. And then after that, we're going to have a go at using some time adverbials in our writing to tell the reader when exactly the events are happening in the story. Okay? And if you're not sure what a time adverbial is, remember, don't worry, everything will become clear as we go through today's lesson. Okay? Okay, so I'm just going to get my ideas down for this part, and then I'm going to come back to my writing challenges. Remember, these are my writing challenges: interesting verbs, time adverbials. Now, in this part of the story, Piper sees a little crab digging in the sand, doesn't he? So I'm going to write Piper. Just going to get my ideas down, and then I can edit it in a second, can't I? So Piper, or I can say a crab. I don't want to keep starting with Piper, do I? A crab was digging about in the sand, full stop. Okay, and that is my idea for writing. It's not very interesting yet, but it does make sense, doesn't it? And it is what has happened in the story. So I'm quite pleased with that as an idea, and now I'm going to start making it better. Okay, a crab was digging about in the sand. Now, interesting verbs. The word digging is all right, but it's not great, is it? So I'm going to have a think now about some different verbs that mean digging. So what could I have? I have scraping. You can sort of scrape with your claws, can't you? Or maybe with your nails if you're a human. Scraping. I could have burrowing. I could have scratching. So I could have scraping or burrowing or scratching. What do you think? A crab was burrowing about in the sand. A crab was scraping about in the sand. A crab was burrowing. I like that word. A crab was burrowing about in the... Let's just get rid of those. We've used the one we wanted now. A crab was burrowing about in the... What kind of sand might it be? In the pale, golden sand. That's quite nice. A crab was burrowing about in the pale golden sand. That's a really nice verb there, a really nice action word. I'm just going to highlight that for myself because I know that I've got one there. A crab was burrowing about in the pale golden sand. And that made Piper feel really confused. So I'm going to write Piper was confused. Exclamation mark, I like that. Piper was confused. Exclamation mark. Piper was confused, and I think he's going to be asking himself, what was he doing? Question mark. That's like a rhetorical question, a question that Piper is asking himself in his head, isn't he? What was he doing? Piper wondered. Maybe I'll write that. Piper wondered. What was he doing? Piper wondered. He watched on, didn't he? He watched, or he looked on and saw that... What did he see? What did the crab do? When he was watching the crab, what did that crab do? He looked on and saw that the crab had picked a clam. A clam, that's like a shellfish, isn't it? You can see that little white one there, that's kind of like a clam. A clam from beneath, I like that, beneath, that means under, beneath the sand, full stop. Okay, let's read it together and see if we can find the verbs, and then we can decide whether they're interesting or whether they need to be upscaled, whether we can make them better. A crab was burrowing about in the pale golden sand, full stop. Capital letter, well done me. Piper was confused. What was he doing? Piper wondered. He looked on and saw that the crab had picked a clam from beneath the sand. Oh dear, had picked a clam from beneath the sand. Those are the verbs that I'm going to have a look at now and see if I need to upscale them. Okay. Piper wondered. Oh, Piper was confused. Now, I don't really like that word. I'm going to use the word perplexed. That means the same thing, but it's quite cool. Piper was perplexed. What was he doing? Piper wondered. How else could he... Piper thought we could have? What do you think? Piper thought. Piper mused. Piper wondered. Piper asked himself. Oh, I quite like that. Piper asked himself. Or Piper thought to himself. What do you think? Piper thought to himself. I like that. Piper thought to himself. Let's get rid of those ones. Okay, he looked on. Don't really like that. He watched, perhaps. He watched. Oh dear. He watched. He stared. He gazed. I quite like watched. He watched on intently. That means he was really into what he was doing. He was really watching carefully. He watched on intently and saw... We had to think about that one last week, didn't we? What could we say instead of saw? He noticed. He spotted. We had spotted last week, didn't we? He spied. Oh, I like that. He spied. And spied, the crab, spied, we can say spied the crab rather than spied that the crab. Spied the crab picking. And spied the crab picking or plucking, we could have. Plucking a clam from beneath the sand. What do we think? Shall we see if we can read it together? Here we go. A crab was burrowing about in the pale golden sand. Piper was perplexed. What was he doing? Piper thought to himself. He watched on intently and spied the crab plucking a clam from beneath the sand. What's going to happen in a minute? The wave's going to come, isn't it? So I think I'm going to end this part with an ellipsis, because something's about to happen, isn't it? Dot, dot, dot. Brilliant. So what do we think about interesting verbs? I'm going to tick off my first writing challenge. Now I need to think about time adverbials. Those are words or phrases that tell us when something is happening. So can you think of a time adverbial? I'll start you off. I've got 3 here. I've got then, next, and later. Pause the video and just see if you can think of any more time adverbials. Okay, what do you think? We could have at that moment. At that moment. That means it happened just then, didn't it? Didn't happen last week. It happened right at that moment. That's another one we could have. We could have last week. That's a time adverbial. Tells me when something happens. It happened last week. What else could we have? We could have yesterday, perhaps. Those are all time adverbials, aren't they? Okay, so I want to add a time adverbial at the start of my sentence here. Okay, I want to add it before I say a crab. So I need to have a look at these time adverbials and see if any of them actually work. Could I say then a crab was burrowing about in the pale golden sand? I think so. Could I say yesterday? No, we're talking about something that was happening right there, aren't we? So it can't have yesterday. Let's delete that one. Could I say next? Yeah, because it's happening after Piper was splashed with the wave, isn't it? Yeah, so I could have that one. Could I have later? Well, later's kind of like if it happened a long time after, but the crab started to burrow straight after Piper was splashed with the wave. So we can't have later. We might be able to have just then. What about just then? That might be nice. What about last week? No, because that happened too long ago. At that moment. What do we think? Yes, because Piper was splashed with the wave, and then right at that moment, the crab was burrowing. So I like that one. I'm going to use at that moment. And when I use a time adverbial, children, I have a comma and a space and a finger space afterwards, especially if it's at the beginning of a sentence like mine is. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that one in green for us because it's a time adverbial. At that moment, a crab was burrowing about in the pale golden sand. Piper was perplexed. What was he doing? Piper thought to himself. Could we have another time adverbial here? What could we have? I've written, then Piper watched on intently and spied the crab plucking a clam from beneath the sand. I don't really like it though, so I think I'm going to take it out actually. And I'm going to replace it with my he like before. Sometimes you try things, children, and they don't really work very well, so you can just take them out if you want to. Okay, so I've got one time adverbial and lots of interesting verbs. Pause the video and go and have a look at writing your plot point 5 using these 2 writing challenges. Okay, come back to the video if you need to use some of my ideas, that's absolutely fine, and then take a picture of your writing and send it to your teacher on Class Dojo. We really look forward to seeing your writing and to giving you some feedback, okay? Enjoy! Bye!